I now invite Dylan Ashcraft to come forward to light the chalice and lead us in our affirmation of covenant, which is in your order of service.
I light this chalice with these words: open our eyes to see what is beautiful, open our minds to learn what is true, open our hearts to love one another. Please join me in the affirmation of covenant, which you will find printed in your order of service, saying, love is the doctrine of this church, the quest for truth is its sacrament, and service is its prayer, to dwell together in peace, to seek knowledge and freedom, to serve humankind in fellowship, to the end that all souls shall grow into harmony with the divine. Thus do we covenant with each other.
Since I do believe that the Sunday nearest the IRS deadline is always a good time to reflect on the political economy, I want to pick up a thread I left hanging last month when I talked about keystone species. Biologist Bob Payne's idea, supported in much subsequent research, that in any ecosystem there was one species whose presence more than any other kept the balance that allowed a diversity of species to survive and thrive there together. Initially, it was assumed that the keystone species would be a predator, keeping herbivores in check, protecting the foundational plant life from extinction. But on the Serengeti Plain in East Africa, unchecked migrating herbivores were the key to establishing a diversity of plant life that supported more abundant life there. This discovery that the keystone species is not always a predator challenged the conventional view that ecosystems were built from the bottom up. Plant life, once established, drew herbivores, which in turn drew predators. This in turn cast doubt on certain ideas derived from that scheme. Freshwater biologist Mary Power, for instance, recognized that predators instill fear and postulated that a landscape of fear was part of the ecological balance. Not necessarily so on the Serengeti, or at least while fear may be present and have influence in an ecosystem, it need not be regarded as essential to ecological balance or health. You'll remember I cited Henry David Thoreau, who wrote of feeling as though he had done something for the commonweal when nature used him without his knowledge, such as using him to convey seeds and burrs on his daily walks. But ecological science has shown us how much our knowing can enhance our contribution to the common good. Lauren Isley's story of the star thrower, in which an apparently irrational but generous activity, throwing beached starfish back into the sea, promises to catch on one person to the next and become a generative cultural change. That suggests, I think, that letting nature use us with our knowledge promises even more. Economic science, by contrast, seems to glory with Thoreau in ignorance. Among biologists are the star throwers, but it would seem that among economists are only dart throwers. The reigning paradigm of a free market rationally regulated by the invisible hand of individual self-interest, operates actually to inhibit both public understanding and academic progress. Behind the veil of this paradigm, the academic field we call economics resembles nothing so much as the classic image of the blind men describing an elephant. Each describes it as entirely resembling the small part they are able to reach and touch. Since the field itself is still today fragmentary and underdeveloped, its descriptions of capitalism are partial and unintegrated. There are many reasons for this. The difficulty of acquiring data is a major one, as is the inherent complexity of that data. But so is the field's habit of inventing ways to wave away complexity, saying things like all else being equal, or labeling influences not accounted for as externalities, or making questionable assumptions like all agents in a free market are rational. If I'm right in assuming that an economy is analogous to an ecosystem and that it's better to participate in it knowing how it uses us and seeking actively to contribute to the common good rather than passively accepting whatever mess our neglect or abuse produces, then it's clear that we desperately need a better paradigm, one that orients us within the economy and toward one another. Biologists have parsed ecosystems according to their participants: vegetation, herbivores, predators. It seems to me that capitalism, typically defined as an economic system in which resources and means of production are privately owned, and prices, production, and the distribution of goods are determined mainly by competition in a free market. It seems to me that capitalism might be similarly sorted. We might speak of producer capitalism, participation from the point of view of farms, manufacturing firms, and labor. Mercantile capitalism, the viewpoint of merchants and traders. Financial capitalism, that of equity holders and traders. Regulated capitalism, the perspective of government. And consumer capitalism, that of the household. Indeed, we already do speak of those things, but not in the sense of participants in a shared environment. Each of these ways of participating in the economy has different priorities and concerns, just like the grasses and trees, wildebeest and zebras, elephants and giraffes, lions and leopards on the plain. If we understood better how these ways of participating work together to strike a balance that favors abundant life, we might learn how we can participate in ways that promote the common good. As it is, economists teach us that the common good is produced through competitive markets where each participant promotes their own good without regard to anyone else's. From that scenario, it follows that whatever role a given participant finds themselves in must be the one that more than any other keeps the economic balance that provides more abundance for everyone. And it does seem sometimes that participants and even economists assume that the key role must belong to a predator. Economists, I think, have a long way to go to understand the economy as well as biologists understand ecosystems. But I think a closer study of the economy as an integrated system, rather than as a collection of distinct activities loosely held together by magic, would advance the field a lot. It would also help to gain some historical perspective on both how the science of political economy developed and how economies have developed before and since. One economist, Benjamin Friedman, who just turned 80, recently published a book called Religion and the Rise of Capitalism, in which he describes the intellectual and social culture that informed Adam Smith's worldview and those of his contemporaries. Most people today who talk about self-interest and the invisible hand and all of that don't understand what Adam Smith meant by those terms or appreciate what, as a moral philosopher, he presupposed as he invented economic theory. So, as to how modern economic theory developed, we're on our way. As to how actual economies must have developed, Jane Jacobs was on the track of that in her dialogue, Systems of Survival. Her book's subtitle, A Dialogue on the Moral Foundations of Commerce and Politics, suggests that she meant the commercial moral syndrome to represent the moral ideas of business: voluntary collaboration, keeping promises, respecting contracts, honesty, efficiency, industry, thrift, optimism. And the guardian moral syndrome, that's the perspective of government: power, hierarchy, discipline, obedience, Machiavellian prowess, largesse, fortitude, honor. But to me, her commercial list sounds like the ideals of modern capitalism, and her guardian list like those in an earlier agrarian economy. I think it's not reflecting, these two syndromes don't reflect segments of our economy today, but rather historical phases of economic activity. Adam Smith and his contemporaries wrote during the transition from a state-dominated agrarian era to a business-dominated capitalist one. They described features of both. A rounded picture would also have to take in what a nomadic society's economy looked like. And in her book, The Mushroom at the End of the World, on the possibility of life in capitalist ruins, take a moment to absorb that title, anthropologist Anna Lowenhaupt-Singh gets on the track of this nomadic economy by noticing the presence of foraging in today's economy. So we have a start there too. Her work is an example of contributions scholars in other fields have made and continue to make to economics. Another is psychologist Daniel Kahneman, who died just last month. He won the Nobel Prize in Economics for contributions from his field of psychology. And so, for that matter, is Jane Jacobs, an outside of the field contributor of good ideas. Plenty of material is available to carry the science of economics closer to an integrated, well-developed source of economic understanding. What the field needs today is another Alfred Marshall or Paul Samuelson, the authors of milestone economics textbooks that pulled it all together. Now, I do believe that in an economy or in any natural system, it's better to participate in it knowing how it works, how it uses us, and what kind of participation tends toward the common good. In its current state, the field of economics offers little guidance. We need desperately a better paradigm than the invisible hand, one that can orient us within the economy and toward one another. And because love is our teaching and service is our prayer. This feels to me like a spiritual topic, at least an ethical one, because we must live in an economy no less than we must live in an ecosystem. This is everyone's concern, whether we want it or not, whether we recognize it or not. And it affects our daily lives. So what do we do about it? If you're an economist, keep working on it. For the rest of us, pay attention to the real economic conditions around us here in Central Arkansas. Keep learning what we can about the larger economy. Question conventional economic doctrines. We hear them on the news every day. Are they true? Look for the thinkers who are bringing in knowledge from other fields of study, who are filling in the gaps and pulling together our fragmented understanding, and learn what you can from them. And all the while, participate in the economy as we would anything else, with love as our guide and service our prayer. So may it be. Amen.
I invite Dylan back to extinguish our chalice. And please join in our closing words, which are found in your order of service. Go out into the world in peace. Have courage. Hold on to what is good. Return to no person evil for evil. Strengthen the faint-hearted. Support the weak. Help the suffering. Honor all beings. And may we do all things with love as our guide and service our prayer.